Okay, well, kia ora koutou. Welcome to this talk. My name is Tim Bell, and I'm your lecturer tonight. I have been given some safety information to read out and some important information. So, one important thing is that if you haven't registered for this, I think the team would love it if you did register. They've probably got your name on the way in, so that's good. This lecture is being videoed for posterity, so if you're a bit camera shy or something, just don't jump up and yell out and turn around to the back. The toilets are on my right and my left, if you need them, outside. And if you hear a fire alarm, the friendly staff will direct you in that direction out to the car parks, where we will go as a group in unison. And the same is almost true if there is some shaking, except we start off under the seats and then we decide whether to go as we take bets on what the magnitude was. The format of the evening is, according to this, though I'm in charge, so anything could happen, it's a 45-minute presentation, and then we'll have 15 minutes of questions, approximately on each of those counts. So, welcome to the University of Canterbury, and I'm a lecturer here, so this is just my regular place of work here. The thing that I want to talk about tonight is the computer science in the school curriculum. It started this year. Who knew that, by the way? Someone just said they didn't. Okay, cool. Who's really looking forward to it? Okay, who's a little bit skeptical, wondering what's happening? Who came to find out if it's even a thing? Okay, cool. And just to check, has anyone been to a talk that I've given about this before? Okay, so I'll probably get away with the same jokes then. That's good. It's always good to know. And in particular, there's some demonstrations that I would just deciding which ones to use. So yeah, I've titled this "What's the Big Idea?" because some people are going, well, you know, what's the big picture? What's it all about? And then other people are going, well, what's the big idea? This is a crazy thing to do. And just to start off really differently, I'm a computer scientist, and I'm going to start with the karakia. And the karakia is based on, and some of you may have heard this before, a bird called the tui. This is our mascot, the tui here. And the tui, the word tui in te reo also means to sew or stitch or bind things together, so it's a bit of a play on words. Don't worry, you'll get to see the English as well. But it goes like this, and hopefully it'll make sense later on as we tie things together. Whakarangara, which means I listen. Whakarongo aka a, I listen. We're up on high, ki te tange a te manu. A bird flies. E rere runga rawa e. Its cry rings out. Tui, 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 tui tuia. Sew, stitch, bind together. Tui a runga. From above. That's people who are confident in this whole thing and know what they're doing. Tui a raro. From below. Those who are going, where's this even going? Tui a roto. From within. Those of us who have been a part of it for a long time. And tui e waho. From outside, those who are coming to join in on this mahi. Tuia e te here tangata, the thread of humanity. Kia rongo te ao during the day, kia rongo te po during the night. Those students are still here working. Tui, tui, tui tuia. Sew, stitch, bind together. A lot of the theme of what we're going to be looking at is going to be the thread of humanity. What on earth is going on here? So if you came to find out about gadgets and digital technology and devices and so on, we're going to do that, but we're going to look at how that ties into the thread of humanity. I'm going to start with a story, and there's two morals to the story. So I was visiting New York once with my wife, and one of my ex-students worked there running a very large research organization that builds search engines, and he had done very well, and he invited us out for dinner, and we had a lovely time meeting up with him, and he said, oh, there's a great jazz concert on tonight. Well, who's missing James Morrison tonight to be here? I am. I couldn't get out of it. So, thank you for being here. And so, you know, we love a good jazz concert, and he said, oh, you should go. I can't go, but I'll shout your tickets. And I thought, oh, that's lovely. So this is the first moral of the story. Get your students to learn, if you're a teacher, get them to learn really good stuff so they can have a great career and shout your tickets when you go to visit them. And so we go to this concert in downtown New York, and we arrived, I don't know, 20 minutes early or so, and there was a queue going out the door, and people were getting really, agitated because 20 minutes to go in the concert in this really slow queue. And so we joined the queue, and we're trying to figure out what was happening. And each person who got to the front to collect a ticket, because we didn't have our tickets, we had to collect them at the will call counter, as they call it there. Each person was taking forever to get their ticket. And as we got close to the front, and it was like about 3 minutes before the concert and the tension was building, we noticed that what was happening is that the girl who was giving out the tickets, each person came up and she'd say to them, "What time did you make your booking?" And each person would typically go, "I don't know." And she'd roll her eyes, and as only people giving out tickets can roll their eyes, and like, how can you possibly not know what time you made your booking? Sighed and went through every single envelope looking for their name, which of course was, I think there'd be 300 odd people who were going to this concert. Gave it out, next. And so we came up, and what time you made your booking? I don't know, a friend booked it for me. Rolled her eyes, and we sat there for about a minute while she went through every single name. Oh, here's your ticket, fantastic. We went through, and as I walked away, behind me I could hear her say, "What time did you book your ticket?" And someone going, "I don't know," and I could hear her roll her eyes as she started to go through again. Now, to me, this is a fabulous example of discussing computational thinking. Computational thinking is one of the names that appears in our new digital technologies curriculum, and it's not thinking like a computer, but it's thinking about process. It's thinking about what's the best way to do things. So suppose you had the job of giving out the tickets, how would you have done it? You'd put them in alphabetical order? Okay. And how would you put them in alphabetical order? You've got 100 tickets by last name, and again, we need to get more and more precise. Would you pull out all the A's and then pull out all the B's, or would you sort of pull out all the large ones and the low ones in the alphabet? And there's no easy answer or no definite answer to that, but the point is that that's computational thinking. It's what's the best process that I could do for the general case, for the next time that I have to give out tickets. And so that is a very big theme in the curriculum. And as you can see, we've already done that without really using computers, which is quite good because I'm sufficiently inept with computers, I managed to put some text in the middle of my picture. So when we think about technology and people say, technology's ruining society, or I don't want technology at the table, or technology's fantastic, or whatever, we have to realize that technology itself can be all sorts of things. So one of the things I do in my spare time is I play the pipe organ for fun. Not that one, that's someone else. But the point I'm trying to make is that that's a piece of technology that's been around for a long time. In fact, most musical instruments, well, all musical instruments, are a form of technology where we've modified something to be able to make a nice sound, or to entertain people, or entertain ourselves. But the trouble with any technology when we make it is that it could always be better. And I can't help thinking that even in the olden days, people would wonder, well, there's this new thing come out, but is it better? I've just got used to this one, and maybe if I get the latest pipe organ or a computer or whatever, they say that a computer is something that you bring your problem to it, and it gives you 3 problems in return. Yeah, like, oh, I'll just print out this invitation. It says, that's fine, but can you just reinstall your printer driver because it's time to redo that? And you go, yeah, fine. And it says, oh, that's fine, but actually before I let you use it, do you mind rebooting it? Sure, I'll reboot. Oh, I've just rebooted, but that's actually removed a whole lot of other stuff that you needed, or it's triggered something else and so on. Yeah, exactly. The printer's out of ink anyway. So, but that technology we have, but what's so special about digital technology? Well, I just took a photo of Sarah and Sarah, who were out the front there, along with our other mascot. This is Arnold, the wonder parrot, who has travelled many miles with us on this journey. And but what I've done is I've dropped it into a piece of software, and at the end I'll give you the links for this. But it's a thing which enables us to zoom in on photographs, which is all very well. But as we zoom in on this beautiful photo, including Arnold, we can see that it's made out of lots of little squares, which are called pixels, fantastic, which is short for, well, picture elements, in case you're wondering. So you just take the pic and the L, and it spells pixel. Well, you put an X in to make it look more technical, because then it's kind of more impressive. So, and we have thousands of pixels here, right? In fact, a typical photograph might be roughly 1,000 by 2,000 pixels, so that's about 1 million pixels. The scientific prefix for 1 million is, just checking who's here tonight. If you have 1,000 of something, it's like 1,000 grams, 1,000 meters. It's a kilometer. So if we have 1 million meters, it's a megameter, okay? So from here to Australia, it's about 2 megameters, all right? It doesn't sound quite as bad when you put it that way. So here I've got about 2 million pixels, or 2 megapixels. Fine, we'll come back to that in a minute. But if I carry on zooming into, say, this red background here, then we can start to see that the pixels are actually made out of numbers. Who knew digital photos had digits in them? This is the point, is that it's all about digits. And so if we just have a look around this photo, we notice here that this pixel up here has got 3 numbers, 201, 95, 71 for RGB. But what's RGB? Red, green, blue. Who chose red, green, blue? Why did they choose them? Well, red, green, blue are primary colors. And in fact, I've got a mixer here. We can make most colors, pretty much any visible color, by mixing red, green, and blue together. So if I mix red and blue together, I get purple. If I mix red and green together, I get yellow. Excellent. Especially if I have lots of them. Who knew? But why red, green, and blue? Why are they the primary colors? And by the way, there's a whole thing about, isn't it yellow, red, and so, but anyway, that's different, whole different area. Why are they the primary colors? Well, if we, in fact, if you gaze into someone's eyes, maybe don't do it right now because that's just weird, but if you go home tonight and gaze into someone's eyes with a microscope, at the back of their eyes, there's about 4 million odd cells for detecting light. And those cells are pigmented red, green, and blue. That's how we're made. We have red, green, and blue detectors in the back of our eyes. Well, most of us do. 8% of males haven't got the red-green thing going on properly, okay? And so they can't distinguish red and green very well, which is fine, except, we don't use red and green for anything terribly important that you need to distinguish. So when I was showing you the yellow before, slightly simplified, all I was doing was stimulating the red and green sensors in your eye, okay? And that sent electrical signal to your brain, which went, oh, that's yellow. Or maybe a different color if you had issues with the sensors. But the real point I want to make here is that I just showed you a whole lot of numbers which represented how much red and green and blue to mix together to get the red, and we'll just go back and look at it. And so I could have transmitted that picture to you simply by reading out every single number there. You could write them all down. Not up for it? There's only a few million of them. And then reproduce those colors. In fact, what the computer really sees, I can turn that off. Well, it doesn't see anything, but it's just storing those numbers. So now, there was a red chair in the background, I think, and if I wanted to write a computer program to detect where that red chair is, well, if I go along here, then the red value is quite high, not much green and blue, so that's probably red. But here, suddenly the red value drops off, so that's probably the edge of the chair. Okay. And so computer vision, if I wanted to try and find Arnold's eyes, I'd be looking for a white patch with some black in the middle. Okay. And so I'd be looking for the 3 numbers that combine to do that. The point I'm trying to make is that all of this computer vision, all of this magic stuff we can do with computers, detecting where faces are and things like that, it's just numbers. It's just processing digits. But that's what makes digital technology so cool, because the digits that I use to represent that photograph are exactly the same, they're stored in the same format as digits that we use for a sound recording, or digits that you use for a word processor, or for a web page, or whatever the thing is that you want to be able to transmit, which means that you can store exactly the same things on the same device. So this is a digital device. It can store those digits, and it can record sound, play sound, photographs, videos, text messages, all sorts of things like that, but they're just a bunch of digits. But what makes it so cool is that it is so versatile, and it can transmit them, and the networks that can take those digits, they don't care whether it's video. Well, they do care, because if it's video, it takes forever and uses up much more bandwidth, but it's the same thing that's doing all of that. So we end up with something really versatile, and now all we need to do is apply what's called algorithms to those digits. We just need to change those digits or recognize patterns in them, and next thing we're detecting faces, or we're looking for something that's dangerous, like if you're about to back into a fence or something like that, or we're looking for cancer cells, or we're looking for DNA patterns, or whatever the digits are representing today. Someone can come up with an idea for what we could do with those digits, as long as they can come up with some sort of process, some sort of algorithm for that. So the other thing that, how many people are familiar with the idea that computers actually don't use exactly the digits I showed you there, but they only use 2 digits? So is that a familiar idea? How many people are confident with how to represent 2 digits, how to represent things with 2 digits? A few of you? Okay, so this is now in primary schools. So a senior primary school student is expected to understand how we can represent things using just 2 digits, which might seem a wee bit weird. Why do kids need to know that? Does anyone want to volunteer to be a primary school kid demonstrating for me today? You just need to be able to think as a primary school kid, which just sort of stand here and wiggle a wee bit and things like that. Can I get a few volunteers? Is that all right? Great, thank you. Just need 4 more. Cool. 2, 3. It's not hard. Oh, by the way, the audience is going to do all the work. Okay. It's probably a bad time to ask for a couple more people to volunteer. Oh, by the way, the skill you need is being able to hold a piece of cardboard. Thank you so much. Anyone else here capable of holding a piece of cardboard? Thank you. Great. So I'm going to do a bit of a demonstration the way that we do for primary kids, and so I'd like you to try and give the answers that you think are primary school. How many people have primary school kids that you sort of, great, okay, cool. So our first binary digit here can either be 1 dot, or if you flip it over, 0 dots. Now, binary digits are so common that we can't be bothered saying binary digit all the time, so we take the first 2 letters and the last 2 letters and bung them together, and so your job in life is to be a bit, okay? So if you've always wondered what a bit looks like, this is what a bit looks like. It's a person holding a piece of cardboard. And you can count up to 1, which is great, but we need more bits. We need more digits to get bigger numbers, and so you're our next bit, our binary digit, but when your one's visible, and if you flip it over, we get 2 dots. It's still binary. It's either we can see it or we can't, okay? Your job in life, one side or the other. Now, primary school hats on. How many dots on the next one? 3 is what the kids would say. We just give out a card like that, and there's normally a bit of murmuring, and, oh, you made a mistake or whatever. And I go, no, I didn't. There's a pattern here. Now, here's the real hard question for adults. How many dots for the next one? Not 8. 6. Yeah. 2, 4, 6. But then actually someone in the class will yell out, hang on, no, it's 8. And there'll be a bit of an argument, they'll have a bit of a discussion, and the 8s always win. And there's lots of explanations, 1 and 1 is 2, 2 and 2 is 4, or if you take 2 of these cards, you get 1 of those, and so on. But it is indeed 8. Now, at this point, you're usually away. The next one is 16, 32, yep, sure, I've got more cards. And actually with kids, it's usually hard to stop at this point, depending on how old they are. So here's the last 3. I won't bother using them too much, but just in case you're wondering, that's a collection of 8 bits. And if you go to the dairy and you ask to buy a bit, you can't buy them in packs of 1. You have to buy packs of 8, okay? And so it's called a byte. So if you ever wonder what a byte looks like, it's 8 cards. Except we make them smaller. They're actually shiny things on compact discs and DVDs, or they're magnetization on hard disks and things. And there's billions of them on a hard disk, so it's actually smaller than this. But we can do a lot with 5 bits. And so what I'm going to ask you to do is, as an audience, I would like exactly 11 dots visible. So do you want the 16 visible or not? Thank you. 8? 4? 2? Take a vote on this. Who wants the 2? That's a yes, okay. The 1? Yeah. So we've got 11 dots visible, but the way you communicated that to me was no, yes, yes, okay? So you've communicated something to me by only saying it could have been black, white, white. Or as one group that I worked with, they decided they wanted it to be quack, moo, moo. As long as you can say 2 different things, you can communicate a number. Now, there's many things we can do with that, but I'm just going to skip a few things, and I'm going to tell you the month in which I was born. Actually, I think I'll use quack and moo, because that's really cool. So shall we use quack for black, because that's easy to remember? Okay, and moo. Okay, so here's the month I was born using quack and moo. Quack, moo, quack, moo, quack. Okay. What month was I born? October, yeah. So you get the point? Just as long as I can communicate 2 things, I can communicate months, I can communicate numbers, and I think, yeah, just for fun, we'll do, there's all sorts of patterns and so on in here, but I think we'll do letters of the alphabet. So, oh, by the way, what's the smallest number these bits can represent? 0, excellent. Kids would normally yell out 1, and then you pause a bit and they'll yell out 0. So let's have 0. And what's the highest number they can represent? Have them all visible. 31? Yeah, we'd actually normally go through a bunch of patterns. It's 1 less than the next card. Okay, so there's 31 dots there. You can count them if you don't believe me. But you notice also in terms of scaffolding for young kids, all you have to be able to do is count up to 31. You don't necessarily even need to be able to add, although it sure helps. So I can send you a number just by saying quack and moo between 0 and 31. How could I transmit a letter of the alphabet by doing that? Assign a number to each letter of the alphabet. So what number do you want for the letter A? 1, okay, and B? Cool. There was one class I was working with where a kid wanted A as 3 and B as 21 and C as 11 and so on, but the rest of the class disagreed. So it's pretty straightforward to end up with this code here, but this time I'm going to transmit the code using sound, and again, normally we could explore that, because it's not knowing how it's done that counts, it's just being able to explore the ideas. So we're going to go with high and low sounds for now. So we've got beep and beep, okay? In fact, yeah, so which one do you want to be black? Beep or beep? Okay, so just quick practice, beep is black, and beep, white, okay. And the other thing that, of course, we're learning at the same time as we're going from left to right, when we give out digits to people, we start with the most significant one and go down. Now I need to think what I'm going to say. Okay, here we go. A beep, 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 beep. What letter was that? Okay, here's the next one. Beep, 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 beep. Notice it doesn't matter if it's quite in tune. There's only 2 values, so yeah. Got that one? A. Okay. Beep, 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 beep. Got that letter? And here's the last one. Beep, 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 beep. So what did I just sing? Was it really accurate? I got every single letter exactly right. So you'll be able to go home tonight and say, look, he sung jazz, and it was just absolutely precise, okay? It's for those of you who missed out on James Morrison tonight. Not that I'm sore about it, but it's okay. Hey, thank you to our bits. Have a seat. That's fantastic. Appreciate that. I think you should give them a hand, actually. Yeah. Now, there's a whole lot of things in there, and it's what we unpack from this that really counts. The first thing is, how many letters are there in the alphabet? 26. Whose alphabet were you talking about? because there's 3 alphabets that are part of New Zealand official languages. So the actual correct answer is which alphabet, okay? And and this is where I want to start to introduce the idea that yes, we're talking about bits and bytes and digits and all RGB and things like that, but what RGB is really about how humans are made. Alphabets are about what culture you're from. So to this day, there are places where you cannot spell the word Maori correctly, such as in a URL, okay? And so someone who wasn't involved in Maori culture might say, oh, that's okay, everyone knows what it means, it doesn't really matter. But if the system had been designed by someone who was involved in that, then maybe that would have been designed that way from the ground up. Of course, we can represent all sorts of symbols now, but the codes that we used for a long time were a system of codes called ASCII. Okay, so who's heard of ASCII before, ASCII codes? Okay, what's the A stand for? It's the American Standard Code for Information Interchange. Now, it turns out that there are countries outside America, and that the American alphabet isn't quite enough, even for us here in New Zealand. And the other point that I'm sort of getting to here is that the people who are designing these things, the people we want at the table who are involved in this, we want people from different cultures, from different worldviews, from different backgrounds, so that we don't just get a monocultural digital society. Here's my most boring slide for the evening, I think it is. This is an actual, what's called a progress outcome from the new curriculum. And like most curriculum, it's designed to last a long time and be almost meaningless if you just read it out loud. But the bit I've highlighted down the bottom says that, by the way, so this is called progress outcome number 5. It's typically around year 10 students, okay? So at the junior high school sort of level, that they should understand how computers store types of data using binary digits and develop programs considering human-computer interaction heuristics, and we'll get onto that in a second. So storing digits, not a big deal knowing exactly how it's done, but there's all that culture around it, all those human issues, that's the stuff that really counts. How can I represent images? How can I represent sound? And then all the stuff that goes with that, which is the ethics. Okay, just because I am storing an image of, say, Sarah and Sarah, what am I allowed to do with that? I got their permission to use it, by the way. Yeah. So that's okay, but there's a whole lot of thing that when you get hold of people's data, you have to be very careful about it, and then you need algorithms that give you security and algorithms that enable you to transmit it. So, I mean, who's got a digital device with them in the room? Okay, so if it's got Wi-Fi on it, it's busy transmitting stuff in the room. It might be hooked into our Wi-Fi receiver here, and anyone can receive what is being transmitted as long as they've got a radio receiver, which of course every digital device has in it because it has to receive stuff from the Wi-Fi as well. So whatever your computer's doing or what your mobile phone's doing, it's shouting it to everyone in the room. Yeah, that gets a quiet response, doesn't it? The good thing is that it's encrypted, and the encryption is so strong it uses, the strength of encryption is based on the number of bits that the encryption uses. Now, for a while, the Americans had a law that no one was allowed to export software that used more than 40-bit encryption keys. In other words, if you had a number bigger than 40 bits as the secret code for decoding a message, they could arrest you. If you had less than 40 bits, they could decode it and find out if you're doing something dodgy and arrest you for that as well. And so there was a huge civil liberties kind of issue around that, but the law itself just said, don't use more than 40 bits. And a lot of what we want to do is, have students growing up in this digital world, understanding enough about what's going on that they could actually make decisions about that, not just, oh, my friend said 40 bits isn't very good, I think I should protest against it, but I kind of understand it. I mean, we have our kids, hopefully at the moment, roughly understand some of the issues with nuclear energy. Maybe they understand some of the kind of issues with genetic modification and things like that, and people form opinions about those, and people can have the same information and form different opinions, that's fine, but hopefully it's based on facts rather than, oh, someone I kind of trust says it's bad, so it's bad, or this person says it's good, so it must be good. Or it suits me, so it must be good. So a lot of this is basically enabling kids to grow up in a way that they kind of understand the world that they live in. Now, the activities we've done with digital stuff here are largely not involving computers. And this is how I got involved in this, is that years ago I developed this thing called Computer Science Unplugged, along with some colleagues, in which kids can do all sorts of these things without actually getting in front of a computer. And we found that actually they often thought more, when they're in front of a computer, they sort of go into this mode of tell me what to type and I'll type it in sort of thing. Whereas here they get thinking. And what we've been finding lately with research that people have done using this is that if you get kids to do some of the unplugged stuff before they get to a computer, then they actually end up learning more about digital technologies and the computer than if they'd spent the entire time on the computer. It's kind of counterintuitive. You learn more by not using a computer some of the time. The reason being that they actually think. And a lot of the activities we do involve running around in the playground and following lines on the ground and drawing things and stuff like that. And when I say, we developed it, one of the main people I worked with is a guy called Mike Fellows, who has famously been quoted as saying computer science is as much about computers as astronomy is about telescopes. And by the way, Dijkstra also quoted that, in case anyone's going, didn't Dijkstra say that? But he actually learnt it off Mike, which is fine. The computer science, computer scientists use computers, they use digital devices, they're doing stuff with them. But astronomers are like that too. They've got telescopes. They always want money for any astronomers here. Before I get too rude about astronomers, they want money for more telescopes and better telescopes, and they're always polishing them and trying to the bigger lenses and bigger this, and let's put it out in space, all this sort of stuff. And fair enough, but it's not because they just love well, maybe they love telescopes, and there might be the odd astronomer who's in it just like, I have to write all these reports about stars just so I get to use a telescope. But the real point is that we don't write computer programs for computers. We write computer programs for humans who are going to use them on a computer. And one of the things that we really try to get across to students is the idea that you are writing a program for a person, not for that computer. It doesn't stop when the computer does that thing. The computer doesn't care, but the person who's going to buy it off you or download it or try and use it possibly does. I'm going to do a little exercise. You've probably seen this before. You probably might have even seen a glimpse of it before, but I'm just going to see who's awake. I'm going to hold up a color and get you to call out what the color is. Yeah, it's called the Stroop effect. It's from psychology. A lot of what computer science students study is psychology, because in the end you have to develop things that for people. So yeah, call out the color. Don't worry about the writing, just the color. Here we go. Correct. This color is red. Okay, very good. Let's keep going. Okay, not too bad this hour of the evening. So we've got, incredibly conflicting information there. Now, when you were doing that, who actually felt a bit like you do sometimes when you're using a computer and you go, oh, just did the opposite of what I hoped, or whatever? Yeah, okay. Now, just to give a local example, some of the doors around here have magnetic locks on them that lock after hours. And so here's the one in our department. It's up at the top of the door. And after hours, when it's locked, a light comes on. And that light is either red or green. And so when I'm running late to go home and I go barreling down the stairs and I see the door and it's got a green light, can I go through it? No. It turns out no, which was quite painful to learn the first time, because in my book, green sort of means you can go through it. Now, it turns out red means you can go through it. Green means that you can't. Why would someone do it that way around? It's a digital system. Yeah, there's probably a camera watching people smack into doors. So when you think about it, the person who wrote that computer program and was deciding on the color, what kind of company are they working for? Security company. What's good in security? It's locked, green, okay? So they've written the program from their point of view. Have you ever used programs that were written from the point of view of the programmer and not the user? Yeah? Okay. And it's kind of frustrating, right? And so a big part of, and I had it up in the curriculum before, but a big part of it is being aware of not so much how to annoy people, but the kinds of things that would annoy people and try and avoid using them. So for young kids, it's as simple as putting a message up. So a common thing for younger kids to do is to write a bit of a quiz. And it's very tempting if someone chooses the wrong answer to go, "You're wrong!" exclamation mark, stupid person, or whatever. But those of us involved in teaching know that that's not actually the best response, even though tempting it is when you're writing a computer program and just to prove how right you are. And so the big goal here is to sensitize students to how things might be done and how we could use digital technology to make the world a better place. So it's a bit of a music scene. One of our favourite movies is a movie called Mr. Holland's Opus. Who's seen Mr. Holland's? If you haven't, it's really cool, but bring a box of tissues. It's about a guy who is writing this amazing symphony, but he needs a bit of money, so he starts working as a high school music teacher and kind of gets drawn into that. And one of the underlying themes in the movie is that the principal of the school is all about literacy and numeracy. That wouldn't happen today, but literacy and numeracy gets really emphasized in the school. And to the extent that they push music and the arts aside and funding is cut and his job is under threat, even though he never really signed up for being a music teacher. He wanted to be a composer. But one of the quotes is, when they announced yet another cut to the music department is, well, I guess you can cut the arts as much as you want. Sooner or later, these kids aren't going to have anything to read or write about. And a really important point with digital technologies is we're not writing programs for the computer. If we're writing them for people, then we need people to write programs that are going to be useful for people. And what do we use computers for? We use them for listening to music, for watching videos, for digital TV and all that kind of stuff. And so we want people to be developing digital systems that actually help us. And just another quote for you. This is from a well-known psychologist, Albert Bandura, who said, "Everyday life is increasingly regulated by complex technologies that most people neither understand nor believe they can do much to influence." It feels like that. Our life is run by these complex technologies that we have no power over. Well, even more so, how much do kids feel like that? Just to pair that up, there's another quip that's often used, attributed to Edward Tufte, that there are only two industries that refer to their customers as users. Yeah. Now, one of those industries is not, you don't want the kids to get into. The other industry, people have high salaries, huge job prospects, and it's all totally legal. Both industries involve addiction. Both industries involve trying to get people hooked on a better and better thing all the time. There's lots of money to be made, but in the digital technologies and software industry, you actually can do good. You can deliver food to people. You can deliver new kinds of health systems. I mean, if you go to a hospital now, there's a computer everywhere you turn, or a digital device everywhere you turn. That kind of measures just about everything that's happening. So this is a diagram I find quite helpful. It was published a few years ago. That kids are users. They spend a lot of time on tasks. They know how to use computers. But if we can get them into modifying or even creating with digital devices, it gives them some ownership. It gives them some agency, the ability to actually think that they could influence this digital world. So the big goal for me is really that we want to have an informed society, but there's a couple of groups that are missing out. Now, the image that I had up at the start, actually, I don't know if you remember it, but here it is. What's unusual? This is a picture of digital technologies happening in an intermediate school in Christchurch. What's unusual about this picture? It's girls. A couple of other things if it was a poster all about digital technologies. There's no computer, there's no digital device. And actually Lily here is a Pacifica, Maori Pacifica. Girls, Maori Pacifica, are not part of the picture. Well, they are a little bit, but very small minority. Yet, we actually have computer science in our high school curriculum. Who gets higher grades, boys or girls, in computer science? Girls. Now, ever so little amount, okay? Like, nothing to brag about. But the point is that girls, if we're saying that we're designing stuff for people, stereotypically, who's better at saying, oh, what do you need? Okay, what do you really need? Is this any good? It's not, okay, how can I improve it? As opposed to who goes, what do you need? And actually, don't tell me, I know what you need, I'll build it. You can't use it? Here's a dummies manual, because that, Now, not trying to perpetuate stereotypes, because some guys do a fantastic job of developing software, and some women don't, and that's fine. But in general, the people who don't see themselves at the table are often the people who are absolutely needed. You know, which culture in New Zealand is really good at thinking about people? You know, the European culture is pretty good at that, but it's, you know, we have really rich cultures in New Zealand that have quite a different approaches to humanity, the threat of humanity. So for me, one of the big goals is to improve diversity, to give kids of all kinds, whether they're boys or girls or European, Pakeha, Maori, Pacifica, the opportunity to find out if this is for them. And by the way, I'm really keen for some of them to find out that it's not for them. You know, we get a reasonable number of students who turn up and say, oh, I'm going to study computer science here because it's obviously all about games and I just love playing games, so where's the games? And it turns out that actually you have to think and you have to do hard work and you have to create things and all that sort of stuff and not just play games. So the idea is really just to have kids understand what's going on. Sorry, I'll just go back to this. This group of girls here are from a school in Dunedin. There's an article about them. It was an entire year 13 or 7th form for those of us who have been around a while who had studied digital technologies. It was an all-girls school, so there were no boys around to say, well, I'm better at this than you and you shouldn't be here and so on, which is crudely some of the effects that happen in schools. And so all of them, in fact, practically every single one of those, this is a few years ago, have gone on to literally, one's a rocket scientist. They're working in all sorts of, most of them are doing some sort of computer science or computer programming. Some of them combining it with something else like physics to be able to, you know, push the boundaries of physics by introducing digital ideas into it and so on, because they had the opportunity to find out what it is. And over, I don't think I've met a single girl who's to study computer science with us who said, yeah, I always wanted to be a computer scientist. I always wanted to do programming and that. There must be a few of them out there. But nearly every single one I've come across has got into it by accident. You know, a timetabling mistake, they had to go. One decided to sit in on a computer science lecture with her boyfriend, even though, in her own words, she hated it with a passion. She sat in and went, why do I hate this? It's only because of the stereotypes. Actually ended up doing a PhD at some outfit called Cambridge in the UK in computer science, and you know, changing the world. So, you know, want to give those people the opportunity not to find out by accident, but to actually come across it by design. It's one of my favorite quotes. The greatest tragedy I know of is so many young people never discover what they really want to do. And I think a lot of the purpose of schools, and I talk a lot to school teachers. How many school teachers do we have here today? Wow, okay, cool, good on you. I think, isn't that a lot of what drives school teachers? Is just to help kids find out what they really want to do? I mean, sure, you may have your own subject that you're passionate about and you really want everyone to do that, but you know that really you want kids just to find their way in life. But yes, we are also living in a digital society where just about everything we do is digital. Our shopping, our finance, our transport, our entertainment, our privacy, all of these things, even people wear digital devices to measure their fitness on their wrist. And so all of these things are being influenced digitally, and there's so many issues that come up with that. I just picked a couple of local examples. So the Buskers Festival, very cool festival, just about, you know, crashed and burned. It turned out it was because of a spreadsheet error. By the way, spreadsheets, I don't know if you know, but the majority of spreadsheets that are used in business and for real purposes are wrong, okay? There's a whole lot of research as to why that is, but basically people who generate these spreadsheets and make decisions about how much should we buy or how should we invest or how many people should we hire or sack or whatever, it's probably wrong, okay? Because of the way, the training people have had in how to put together spreadsheets and not testing it. Spreadsheets are almost computer programming. And so if nothing else, if we have computer programming, which by the way is not just about writing code, it's about testing things and about finding bugs and really being confident that it's going to work, then we can probably improve the way that a lot of these things work. And yes, there are good careers. This is a company in Victoria Street downtown that hire a lot of our graduates. Actually, they've changed their name now from Telligis. It's called Verizon Connect. Okay, but they basically do vehicle routing, and their job is to try and minimize the distance that vehicles travel, which means that by writing computer programs, they're saving vehicle miles, they're saving fuel, they're saving time. People overseas pay them a lot of money. I don't think they're well known in New Zealand, But overseas, companies like Coca-Cola, DHL, and so on, pay them to find the shortest routes to do drop-offs because they have better algorithms than other people and they can save more fuel. So yes, there are lots of jobs available. I grabbed this off TradeMe just recently. In terms of what's advertised, it's not really a scientific survey, but the basically, if you look at all the IT jobs in New Zealand, it kind of sticks out a wee bit that most of the jobs are in programming and development. And one of the things that you might hear a lot is people go, oh yeah, I studied IT, but I can't get a job. Well, there are lots of other things that you can do, you know, web design, testing, systems engineers, service desk, and so on. There are jobs there, and people are needed for that. But when we say that there's a desperate shortage, it is a very definite skill that there's a desperate shortage of. Of course, it's good for the people who are in short supply, because supply, demand, all that sort of thing works in your favor. But just the other thing just to be aware of, I think there's this thing recently about New Zealand being the least likely country to be attacked, or something like that, second least likely, whatever. But what about cybersecurity? It turns out that we're under constant attack, right? And we actually have cyber defense in New Zealand, which is absolutely crucial. And you know, in the news every so often you hear about cyber threats and attacks and all that sort of stuff. Who's going to keep us safe? And that's not something you really want to outsource overseas. We need people here in New Zealand who actually know how to do this thing. So there's a whole lot of reasons to do this kind of thing, but, and I could go on all night about it, of course, but as this rolls out, the keys that we're going to need for it to be successful in schools is that we do need to have confident teachers. It is a challenge. Won't pretend that there's nothing much to do and anyone could do it. But there are resources available to do that, and the government is putting in a lot of funding. It's kind of bumping along a wee bit. There's PD funding, and there's a readiness project that's just started, and so on. Particularly at primary level, you only need to learn this stuff to the level of a primary school kid and be able to teach it to that level. But it's good to have the big picture. It's good to know why you might teach students how these things are stored, what the privacy issues are, and so on. It's not just that we want 8-year-olds to be safe on the internet, but we actually want them to grow up into people who are critical consumers of digital technology. We need motivated teachers. We need teachers who can see the point of it. Good resources for students. Luckily, they're being developed. And one of the reasons I was so keen to give this lecture and so pleased to see a lot of you not put up your hands seeing teachers is that it's parents and school management that really need to understand this as well, because it's easy to have a knee-jerk reaction of, oh, it's just more screen time and time in front of a computer must deaden kids' brains and all that. Well, there are things you can do on computers that aren't good for your brain and not good for your social skills or anything like that. But there's lots of things, it's a tool and it can be used well and it can be used badly. But hopefully I've sort of shown that it's a creative thing, and I hope, I'm sort of getting towards retirement a wee bit, and as we get into that area, there's more and more need for digital systems to support us and help us do things and so on. And so I'm hoping my students will sort of develop those as I get older so that my old age will be very comfortable and have appropriate digital things to help me, rather than just spend my entire age fending off spam and attacks and things like that. Which I probably have asked for now that I pointed this out. So, we need to see the big point, and of course teachers need peer support, and so a big part of what's going to be happening at the moment is providing communities for teachers and peer support for them, and that's a whole other talk. The thing is that it is happening. As of February this year, it was part of the New Zealand curriculum from year one, okay? 5-year-olds in schools have things that they can do, simpler than what we're doing here, but it also crosses over with other areas, right through to NCA, which actually contains some fairly advanced ideas from computer science now. But just to conclude, I'll finish with another proverb which I think sums up, I hope, the whole point of digital technologies. And you may have heard this before, possibly in translation. He ata mea nui ki tēnā ao, which is, you ask me, what's the most important thing? Māku e ke atu. I'll tell you. It's the most important thing. There's 3, actually. The first one, he tangata, people. Second one, he tangata, he tangata. And I hope our kids will grow up aware of that, but able to wield digital tools to look after what is the most important part of any computer system, the person that's using it. The program, the readiness program I was talking about, it's called Kia Takatu, and that's only just starting to come online over the next month or two. But there's a website that tells you how great it's going to be. And the projects I've been involved with over the years, Computer Science Unplugged, so some of the stuff we did tonight is on the Unplugged site, and also on the Field Guide, which is more written for, Unplugged is for teachers and its resources to use mainly in primary school. Field Guide is written for teenagers and its resources to do NCA and so on. So thank you for your time. Thank you for paying attention. I think we've got a little bit of time for questions. So are there any questions? And I'm told we're going to run a mic around because I want to be able to hear what you're saying. This is a digital device that transmits your voice digitally, encrypted, by the way, so that's good, isn't it? Is that over here, I think?
Thanks. If computers can create algorithms, then why can't they create their own computer programming? And so why do we actually need people to do that? Someone actually asked me that the other day and I didn't have an answer.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. You know, basically, why can't computers program themselves? Or as I've sometimes heard it, one day they'll be programming themselves, so none of us need to learn how to program or whatever. The key was when you said create algorithms. So at the moment, we can get computers to spot patterns and repeat patterns and do things with those patterns, like recognize faces and things like that. But the lofty goal of having computers program themselves is kind of controversial. So some people think it's going to happen. There are simplistic ways that it has happened, but in the same way, well, could a car make itself? Well, yeah, we've got robots making cars, but does that mean that's as good as a car designer? You know, and so ultimately it comes back to there is a designer, there's someone who actually has to come up with that algorithm, with that process. And don't forget that that includes finding the human need. It's like, oh, there's all this food going to waste in cafes at the end of the day. I reckon I could come up with a digital system that helps get that food to people who could use it. Now, at that point, we want AI to, well, we may not want it to, but AI would have to get to the point of, you know, having empathy and realizing what people would really benefit from. Or I need to write a piece of music that's really going to make people, you know, feel moved at this particular point of the movie or something like that. Now, it's possible to simulate some of these things. Whether or not it will ever get to that point is not entirely clear, but there's a lot of things that computers definitely can't do that a lot of people think that they probably could. So, you know, a lot of it you might think, well, if you just compute things long enough, surely you'll come up with the answer. But the short version of it is, yes, computers are getting exponentially better, kind of, but problems are exponentially difficult. Many of the problems we care about are exponentially difficult, including the one I mentioned about what's the shortest way to drop off a bunch of courier things, what's the optimal way to load up an aeroplane, many things to do with what's the best way to do that. We do not know any algorithm that will solve it, and many computer scientists believe that we never will find one, that they just don't exist, though no one's proved that they don't, so maybe they do. It's an exciting field. Short answer is we don't know if it's going to happen, but there's a lot of reasons to be cynical. Yeah. That could be a whole lecture in itself, actually. It'd be a good one, yeah. Probably a debate, actually, rather than a lecture. Yeah, any other questions? Yeah.
You mentioned briefly at the start the ethics of the, like, sort of the outcomes of what people are doing, and how much is that being taught in this actual?
Yeah, so how much is ethics and those sort of issues being taught? Quite a bit. So this falls within what's called the technology curriculum in New Zealand, and some of you may not be familiar with it, but technology is anything manufactured, so it includes food technology and hard materials and all sorts of stuff, as well as digital technology, which behaves quite differently because stuff just moves quickly and reproduces quickly and so on. So, but the ethical questions are still very similar. A scam is still a scam, whether it's an email or whether it's an old-time, scam or whatever. But because things happen so fast, it's so important. So there's a reasonable amount of, and for younger kids, the ethics is more, here are some of the dangers, as they get older, the ethics are more, here are the considerations, here's what some people think, here's what other people think, how are you going to make up your mind? And of course, different schools have different characters and will take different approaches to those kind of things as well. But to me, that's a really important part of it. When I say the curriculum too, I should point out that there are two curricula. So there's the digital technologies English medium curriculum, but there's also a Māori medium curriculum where everything is taught in Māori language, typically would be used in Māori immersion schools. And that curriculum's slightly different. And it still covers, I mean, a digit's a digit, and no matter what culture you're in, but it's got even more emphasis on you start with the person and you move towards the machine rather than perhaps, let's look at the machine, but don't forget the people. So that, again, is quite an exciting approach. Yeah.
Excuse me. I've heard it said that one of the careers, if you like, or fields of study that we could direct students towards is in fact philosophy and the kind of whole ethical future that we're going to have, like what algorithms can do and what they should be allowed to do and stuff like that. What's your take on that?
Yeah, so directing kids towards a philosophical career and thinking about that. Well, first of all, absolutely, we need thinkers who are going to think about those kind of things. And so if you think of digital technologies as a bit like science in schools too, we need philosophers to think about what we should be doing with science and say, does New Zealand want to be nuclear free and what does that really mean, for example? But it kind of helps to know a little bit of science. And so one of the reasons that this would be for every student is that everyone should know a little bit about what the basics are. But absolutely, we need philosophers, we need musicians, we need artists. We need people who are going to make the world an interesting and thoughtful place. And it would be terrible if everyone became a computer scientist and all the software that was being written was to support other computer scientists. But people operating in all those spheres, it's going to help in the same way that it helps you to understand a bit of English if you're going to be a philosopher, so you can communicate your ideas clearly. More and more it's going to help you to understand digital technologies so that we can have discussions like, will computers take over the world, or should we even make a law that they're not allowed to? So, we'll just turn them off if they get too carried away with themselves or something like that. Yeah.
Kia ora, Tim.
Kia ora.
You mentioned the piece of software at the beginning. You were going to let us know.
Yes, I was going to let you know. It's in the Computer Science Field Guide. And there's a chapter on how data is represented, and it's in that chapter. So the way that the field guide works is it teaches people about, like, in that case, binary numbers and data representation, and it says, drop your photo here and have a look at the digits inside it. Yeah. Help yourself. It's open source, by the way. You can copy it, you can use it, you can sell it, actually, if you want. Good luck selling it when it's available free, but it's quite an important philosophical idea is from everything we produce here. So both of those are based at Canterbury here. They're used all around the world. They've been Unplugged has been translated into about 25 languages now. It's very widely used, which is great because it means that any place I visit I get an invitation, which is nice. Not just New York, who didn't translate it. Actually, they did a Spanish translation for the New York, but the point is it's open source, so help yourself, translate it. It's being translated into Te Reo at the moment. But it means that if someone is like running an after-school class and charging people for it, they're not going, oh, am I making money off something that's free or whatever. No, you can make money off it if you want, yeah. Cool. We've got time for one more question. Cool. Keep it running around too, that's good.
Thank you very much, Tim, for a very interesting presentation. How much involvement did you have in your consultation and the curriculum development, and do you think it's balanced enough to carry us into the future?
Right. Yeah, how much involvement do I have and is it balanced? So I had quite a bit of involvement. Certainly I did a lot of steering early on to, because a lot of people wanted it, and a lot of, I think, for the government, it's like, well, it's just money and effort, and that's not, doesn't come easily out of a government. And so there was a lot of work by a lot of different people to, make the case. So you can see I've sort of got used to making the case. And then a couple of years ago, they said, okay, we can see it's happening all around the world. So there's about 50 countries at the moment implementing a curriculum like this. And I have the privilege of working in a lot of those countries because they've been translating our work, and they say, oh, come over and talk to us about it and how this is working. And so when submissions were called for, I've got a PhD student, Caitlin Duncan, I have to give her credit. She'd basically been writing a PhD on what should happen in schools. So we kind of sent in some of her work that she'd been working on, and that Hekia Parata basically announced that, yep, that's what we're going to do, which is pretty cool for a PhD, actually. She's busy finishing it off at the moment. But to have your PhD enacted in law before it's even finished is quite cool. So yeah, that's the kind of involvement we had. But once they said, yeah, that's the kind of thing we want, it was then given to a lot of other people, including a lot of teachers, who all had a hand in how it should actually land in a classroom, people who are experts on curriculum design and so on. So in terms of what came out the other end, it contains the things that are happening internationally that, personally, I think it shouldn't be too deep. I don't think we should get too carried away with how much we teach. The idea is to spark interest and to give some broad knowledge, not to make people job ready by the time they leave school. And we've achieved that. So in some ways, it's not quite as, some countries just have gone nuts. They've got incredibly, but they can get away with it because they can make the kids stay after school and work hard and all sorts of things too. I don't think it's a better education system when you do that, but there are some differences. So I think the balance is actually quite reasonable. Curriculum's the start, but to me, the really important thing is what we do to get teachers up to speed and how well that's resourced. The Minister of Education last year put aside $40 million to do that. It's probably as much as any country per capita has put aside to achieve that. In my view, there's never enough money to properly support education, but it's a very good start. Yeah. Cool. Okay, might have to call tonight. How are we doing for time? One more question, okay, cool.
I'm just interested, we're seeing this digital technology come to all of our jobs, and what resources are there actually for people currently in the workforce to upskill from adult learning in this space?
Oh, great question. What resources are there for adults already working to upskill in digital technologies? It's probably quite limited, actually, isn't it? There's lots of stuff around. There's courses you can do and things like that. But of course, our kids are growing up in an era where they're used to the idea that they're always having to learn something new, and it'll probably change anyway. But learn some general principles. Yes, there are always courses you can enroll in. It depends on whether you want to, go to a community course or a part-time course, and Polytechs offer, courses. I'd probably have to sort of stop and think carefully about exactly what's available. But there's definitely courses available. It's just also what aspects, like are they teaching you to be a user, which is fine, and possibly what you need, I just need to be able to use this stuff well, or are they teaching you to create the next thing? So for example, there are boot camp kind of courses that say, look, if you want to change career and be a digital creator, and you're prepared to go crazy for 6 months or something like that, then you could do that. Success rates aren't always brilliant because it's pretty intense. Quick shout out, there's a series of courses around New Zealand called ICT grad courses. So the local one in Christchurch is in the South Island. It's called Signal. Signal stands for South Island Graduate something or other, technology something. No, it doesn't. South Island Graduate something. Anyway, signal.ac.nz, and they have courses for people who've done degrees in one area and want to switch to a degree that's more technical, and also for people who are doing technical things but want to add a bit to that. So there are sort of things happening, but in the end, it does take time. And perhaps the closing remark I'll make is that any skill that you want to develop takes time. And I could teach a kid to play Happy Birthday on the piano in half an hour, but and you probably say, oh, that's great, you're a pianist, but we know that there's way more than half an hour ahead of them before we'd say, you've got a great career as a pianist ahead of you. And we're talking about hundreds or even thousands of hours on task to become good at. And most of you in the room will have spent tens of thousands of hours in the area that you're expert in, and probably still, well, I feel like this, I'm still gradually figuring it all out. So I won't pretend that it's something that you learn in 6 months or overnight or anything like that, but it's something that if people put the time into, then they can certainly get more and more involved in it. But it's an investment of time, and as adults, time is pretty precious, isn't it? So, yeah. If I think of anything else in the next few minutes, I'll tell you afterwards too. Okay, so thank you very much for coming out on a freezing Christchurch evening. All the best for those of you who are teaching this. Really keen to see that you're taking the effort to do that. And so thank you very much.